Next. The next meeting. Well, we're going to wrap these up. So I'm ready to go. Time to 5 minutes. All right, I call this meeting to order. Dr. Bellamy. Yeah. All right. So we have a public hearing on the acceptance of bids for license agreement 40 years for small cell wireless facilities, first of 2 readings. Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. Just to start this, since this is technically a franchise, there has been 1 bid received from Cellco Partnership, and we will allow Cellco Partnership at this time to present their permit and kind of explain it to the council.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Lori Schweller, attorney with LeClaire Ryan, representing Verizon Wireless. As you recall, we discussed the state legislation that was adopted in 2016 and 17 regarding provision of wireless services through small cell facilities in city rights of way. Another aspect of that legislation, in addition to the streamlined zoning that you've previously approved by ordinance, was the agreements between the wireless providers on the one hand and the cities or VDOT on the other hand. So what we're requesting tonight is your approval of a franchise agreement, which is subject to the Virginia Constitution, may not exceed 40 years, and requires bids, as we're having today. The terms are straightforward. The memorandum summarizes very well what this agreement is about, and the agreement is enclosed in your packet. So I'm really just here to answer any questions for you.
So any questions? No? All right. So we would like to open the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, if I may say, we also have asked for a waiver of the second reading. I just wanted to make a note of that.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak? No? Okay. Close public hearing.
If we could ask, are there any other bids to place small cell facilities on utility poles? We have to ask that as a formality for the franchise.
Is there any other bid? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Is there a motion?
Mayor Walker, I move that we, I had the language here before, that we approve of the permit and the lease as included in our council packet.
Second.
And the waiver?
If it is, the ordinance itself includes that language Ms. Schweller referred to, so if there's a 4-0 vote, it would pass without a second.
All right. All right. Vote. All right. It carries 4-0. All right.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the approval of the updated standards of design manual, which we will not be approving tonight, but we will hear the presentation.
So I think we have a short presentation, just a PowerPoint slide presentation. I don't know if y'all can see those on your computers or. So I guess first, thank you all for your time this evening. My name is Marty Silman with the City of Charlottesville, and with me is Melanie Alliston Brick with Tool Design Group. I'm just going to go through real quick, try to keep this as short as possible, and see which one of these buttons does what. That was not the right button. All right, so there's a really quick agenda. Just go over introductions I've already done, give you a quick overview of the process, and then I'll turn it over to Melanie, and she'll go over the purpose of the manual, talk about the engagement process that we went through, go through the process for collecting feedback and the resolution of some of that feedback, where we are now and what the next steps are going forward. Just real quick, the design manual that we have today is an existing manual. It was adopted by City Council in 2008. Since 2008, there have been pretty much no significant revisions. There might have been over the years a few small tweaks here and there to correct some, errors or update construction details, things like that. But largely, it's been a pretty much stagnant document since 2008. And so, as a result, it's out of date in a lot of areas. In December of 2016, City Council approved funding for us to hire a consultant, which is when we brought on Tool Design Group and Arcane K as a sub-consultant. And then that contract was executed in last August, basically. And then so over the last 14 months, we've been kind of working through the outline, doing workshops both with city staff and stakeholders. And then doing just draft and revisions and reviewing comments, and there's been some back and forth between certain folks that have provided feedback just so we get clarity on kind of what they were exactly looking for. And so that's kind of been sort of the real quick overview over the last 14 months for this process. As far as goals go, one of the main goals was to incorporate the Streets at Work plan, which I think there's a lot of folks that are familiar with that, which has the street typologies that have their associated characteristics, and make that more of a formal, I guess, requirement for development projects, and also guide city projects as well. In addition to that, there was a need to provide clear design expectations for development projects that impact the public right-of-way, clarify requirements for inspections, revise outdated construction details, and provide a distinct reference to other governing agencies that influence the city's infrastructure, like VDOT, AASHTO, et cetera. And so that's just, again, real quick overview of the process. I'm happy to answer any questions as we finish up the slideshow presentation, but I'll turn it over to Melanie now to kind of carry through the rest of it.
Okay, so Marty went over this already, and let me know if I'm too loud. I'll stand back from the mic a little bit. But so the goal of the manual was to, as Marty said, incorporate Streets that Work, align the manual better with the code. The two hadn't been perhaps keeping track with one another all along, since the manual hadn't been updated in a while, and then to align it with other standards that have jurisdiction within the city of Charlottesville. So first and foremost, just wanted to point out that the manual, contrary to what was perhaps talked about earlier, does not guide development. It is merely a how-to manual. The development code and the site plan regulations talk about how development should go. The planning documents talk about that. This is, once we've decided what goes in our development, how do we design it? How do we put it on paper? What do we need to show the city in order to have them approve our plan? So that's really what the manual does. And during the writing, it was very hard to keep focused on that goal. But we were also trying to provide flexibility, providing more options for the ways that you can design streets and other things in the public right-of-way. It is focused on the public space. It does not talk about really what you can do on your development parcel unless it extends into the public right-of-way, like light trespass or pipes that you need to connect. We've incorporated other modes of transportation, more pedestrian and bicycle focused, slowing the speeds of the vehicles to make walking and biking more comfortable for all the users of the roadways. We also wanted to enhance sustainability and maintainability. So the city has to maintain all this stuff that gets built long after the developer is gone. And so we want to make sure that that's as easy as possible for the city for as many years to come as possible. And then incorporating lessons learned, city staff gave us many, many examples of things that have given them problems over the years with plans that don't have enough information to, you know, utilities that are designed in such a way that it's difficult to connect into the system or they're difficult to maintain. So we took all those lessons learned and incorporated them into the manual. And finally, clarifying what is required on the plans of the developers so that they know this is what you have to put on your drawing and in your stormwater report to get our approval. And so it covers a host of different topics. It's far more comprehensive than the old manual was. Incorporates the new environmental things like green infrastructure. Incorporates new road typologies that are not VDOT standards. Talks more about the lighting, the materials, and the city's long-term maintenance. And so again, what it doesn't do, it does not set policy, it does not guide how you develop a particular piece of land. It does not modify city code, although we did track adjustments that would need to be made to the code in order to bring them into alignment. There were very few adjustments. And then it does not define what's allowed outside of public right-of-way, and it does not limit the flexibility. And I wanted to state for the record that the street typologies that are being proposed and some of the comments that are much narrower than perhaps a typical VDOT street or a typical traditional Charlottesville street, they're not disallowed by this manual. There's a section in the manual dedicated to innovative design proposals. And the reason that that section is in the manual is because we wanted to allow flexibility to propose things other than what's in there. The manual is really for the purpose of knowing how to design those things that you use every day. Innovative design allows you to propose different things and allow it to be considered by the city. We wanted to take a cautious approach. For example, yield streets are one of the things that's proposed. It's a very narrow street where traffic would have to yield to oncoming traffic if there's parking or other obstacles. There's not many of them in the country. There are none of them in Charlottesville. And so we took the cautious approach saying, why don't we let them try it out once or twice? Then if we have to tweak it or we don't like it, then we don't put it in the manual. But if we like it, we can add it to the manual. So that's really the whole point of the innovative design portion of the manual. So we did have quite a lengthy public and stakeholder engagement process. We started with initial workshops a year ago almost, and have been really taking comments almost continuously between April and the middle of September, even though we technically ended the comment period at the beginning of August. There have still been numerous comments coming in, all of which have been addressed. And we received more than 400 comments. We have provided responses, and those are on the website for each and every one of those comments. Majority of them were incorporated into the manual. We now have some late-breaking comments, which are not out of line with what we're trying to do with the manual. But again, much of it is things that would fall under the innovation portion of the manual. And you know, we do have to also recognize the competing goals of the development community who are trying to build on every possible square inch of that property that they can. But the city, again, has to have room for utilities and trees and sidewalks. And so it's a compromise. It's always going to be a compromise. And it's different in new development than it is in historic districts where the stuff has been there for centuries. And a lot of it requires a case-by-case look. It's not as simple as just putting this manual down on paper. So, but the big thing is what we're trying to do with the manual, with the city in mind, was to, again, reduce the costs of long-term maintenance and make things as sustainable and able to be able for the city residents to enjoy as long as possible. So we understand that we are not here tonight, I guess, to have an approval, but we have read the additional comments. I don't know if there are others. We've seen the Cadre ones. You know, we intend to incorporate comments that are not in conflict with city's goals, but again, we have to look at those lessons learned and look at what the city is trying to accomplish, and again, compromise. We are already allowing those innovative design proposals, but we also intend to decline comments that are going to put the city in a financial hardship for long-term maintenance. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking it through thoroughly. So, Marty, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so as far as next steps, I think it sounds like everybody's on the same page to go ahead and conduct some additional workshops, which we can certainly do that. We can kind of review the comments that came in late from Cadre and see how we can incorporate those. And, you know, beyond the immediate concerns with the feedback and everything that's been received or not been received, I think the only other real phase with this is phase 2, which is the construction details, the specifications, and the checklists. The initial plan was to get phase 1, get all the text drafted, and kind of get initial buy-in on that and approval of that, and then we can come back and get the details and the specifications and everything done, because a lot of the text in the manual really drives the details and the specifications. And so I think we want to cautiously kind of dip into phase 2, because we don't want to, you know, get too far with that next section until the draft is actually, you know, vetted, I guess. And so I guess what we're looking for tonight is kind of direction on what you all would like to do as far as additional workshops, or, you know, how you feel like the approach should move forward. I know a lot of the workshops that we did, we tried to keep a pretty lean engagement strategy just for budget reasons. It is a technical manual, but we did, you know, solicit to basically, I think it was 9 stakeholder groups. Those I can tell you, I know it was, you know, the Place Design Task Force, Cadre, City Council, Planning Commission, Tree Commission, the Code Audit Streets to Work Advisory Committee, ADA Advisory Committee, Board of Architectural Review, and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. If there's additional committees that need to be or groups that need to be a part of the conversations, we can certainly bring those in if y'all would like.
I don't think that those groups all felt left out. I think in some of those cases that they did contribute feedback, but some of them thought they'd have another opportunity to see the final version before it came in front of this body. That includes, I will just name a few that we've gotten from the last couple of days. BPED, Tree Commission, obviously Cadre has still theirs is really their first time giving you a formal. They've had members provide bits and pieces, but the formal feedback has been received more recently. But there were multiple, and I feel like we certainly wanted our Planning Commission. I mean, I'm not an expert in this stuff. This is a lot of technical stuff. And so I really would rely on those groups to kind of help me understand, is this where we are? Is this really showing our vision that we have as a community? And I just feel like they would like to have an opportunity to digest what was published this week and just to kind of see what feedback was and wasn't considered and understand why. And some of those things I understand you're not going to be able to incorporate, but I think we need that additional loop back, and obviously with the Cadre, just giving them an opportunity for their feedback to be considered.
And I think it's important to note to not force if it doesn't fit. Yeah. If it's not in guidelines with the direction that the city is going. And again, this is, you know, a process that, you know, I'm learning, but it shouldn't be developer driven. And if that's the case, then it needs to come back before us and for us to deal with their request instead of.
And one other item that I would urge is that folks who are going to comment, be as specific in your comments as you can. We got a number of comments that were, I don't like it. What don't you like about it? It's really hard to react if I don't know exactly what you don't like. I can fix it if you tell me what the problem is.
Right. And may I say something? And you know, I can appreciate that, but in June I gave 25 to 30 comments. I cited chapter and verse in the Streets That Work plan, and when I went over the last plan draft, I could only find 2 of my comments kind of woven into it. So I'm one of those people that really needs to understand why, from my perspective, I am seeing some pretty big deviations from the Streets That Work plan, and that plan was what was the product of over a year of public engagement on the ground in meetings, and it was policy adopted by this board, this group. So I'm really bound to make sure that I understand when you say that you've made these decisions to protect the city's costs and maintenance. I want to understand how that jived with what I'm seeing as didn't connect with the policy. And I've got like 4 pages. I just went back to everything my record from June, and I looked down each section I looked at, and I checked it in the latest draft. And I'm going to send that back to you to see like what happened. Why wasn't this included again? And maybe it's buried in some of your charts, but it was like a fundamental departure from the Streets That Work plan.
And there is a response to each and every comment on the webpage, so you may find some of it in there.
So again, if this isn't a response, but then not to have any reference and even confusion. And I'm going to speak one example of looking at, well, the framework streets and the Streets That Work plan are essentially the arterials and the collectors. There were 6 types of streets, and the local streets weren't even part of that Streets That Work plan, and that was 71% of the city's streets. So then there is language that actually gets kind of confusing in what the draft manual says, that says, oh, well, the type B neighborhood street is going to be essentially kind of sort of our local street. And at the same time, then it says later on, but we can allow for this innovation piece, but it doesn't quite make it very clear that 70% of our streets can be innovations. And so that was number one. Number two, there was a lot in the original Streets That Work plan that talked about green infrastructure in the sense that it was stormwater management integrated within the right-of-way. All of that was taken out. There was a section where it was mentioned, not in this chapter in section 5 and 7 where it's really talked about in a more engineering sense, but it did come up again. I forget in which section it's mentioned, but it's disjointed. It's not part of what you would think of as the stormwater section. So that's where I'm concerned that, you know, like the Streets That Work plan said no in one category, and the draft SADM says yes with regards to whether or not the framework street details applies to local streets. And then with stormwater management, the Streets That Work plan says yes, the right-of-way should be used as a way to clean our stormwater runoff, but then the SADM says no. So those are like 2 big key things for me. So maybe we can just talk later on, but for me that was a big deal, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where the workshops will be beneficial, because I'm sure that we got more than 2 of your comments incorporated. I myself with other staff, we actually went through a lot of the very specific comments and had discussions about them with staff and made specific changes to the manual to address those comments. When we put the spreadsheet up on the website, we did not put the names of everybody that made the comments, just out of respect for those making the comments, but we can certainly, you know, whether it be through the workshop or one-on-one, go through each individual comment that you did provide, and we can show you exactly where it is in the spreadsheet and what the changes were to the manual. But we definitely did more than 2.
Yeah, but so, again, those 2 areas are still pretty, those were deviations.
Okay. As far as the workshops, you know, I know there was mention about doing possibly a planning commission and city council joint workshop, and then perhaps another workshop with the stakeholders. Do you envision those being the only 2 workshops necessary, or do you anticipate additional beyond that? Or
so, Councilor Gowan, are you saying that you submitted these 25 recommendations that should have definitely been incorporated, or?
I'm just saying I was surprised that I didn't see many at all. And I thought that it reflected a real deviation from the Streets That Work plan, which was the policy background for this manual. So that's why I read it a lot, and I have looked at what Cadre brought in, and there's things I agree with and things I don't agree with. I want the Tree Commission to weigh in, because it seems like the Tree Commission would have a different opinion than what Cadre had about tree spacing and grates. I do get the sense from people that have talked to me from the Bike Ped Committee that they on the main agree with a lot of the Cadre comments. So I think we do need to hear from the other stakeholders to see how they perceive the final document, because things do get lost in translation. There's no malintent there, not saying that, but there's just needs to be more clarity as to how it was evolved.
Well, I would like to see, since I'm learning here, because I'm looking at like utility surveys, and it looks like Cadre has cut it down in half of what the recommendations were, and so I will try to make it to these workshops just to understand how that benefits the developer over the city, because I think that is something that the public needs to be well aware of, since it's people who could potentially benefit and profit from these changes, and the city ends up, taking the financial impact of it. So I definitely would want to know, in any changes, just for citizens to be aware that it's noted, if it's not in the city's best interest to make these adjustments.
Absolutely.
And I think part of it's just literally just giving people, these stakeholder groups, because Place was another one that has reached out to us, enough time to kind of digest, but multiple of them actually have asked to have shared with them the Cadre comments, so they can understand what that group is bringing forward. And I think it's really important to have that holistic view of all of those comments, because there are a lot of them, but I think that some of those groups, again, would agree with some and some may not, but I think that would be helpful, as that's all being considered. And I would consider those conversations could happen all at once. And I think we all would like to know when that happens, and if there's 3 of us that come, we'll make it a public meeting, but just to listen. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but I would like to better understand it. And then at the end, towards the back end of that workshop process, I think was when Planning Commission and Council should come in, when we're now that much further along, and then have an update. I just felt like coming right to us directly, for me, like as a new person, this was a lot. It was a lot for even me trying to read through, even just to read through it, let alone really digesting it.
It's a long document.
So,
it's a cure for insomnia.
So even if it was a perfect document and everyone was all on the same page, I think I still would have needed more time. So I don't want you to feel like, sorry that we're kind of going through this process, but I think it's really important. There's so much work, and I really appreciate all of the effort that's been put in place. I attended some of those workshops that you've already had, and appreciate that engagement. And I think we all just want to get to a place where it's a document that we can really feel good about.
I'm really interested in, when we have the discussion moving forward, maybe having a representative from Cadre present, so that we can have a true side-by-side. I think that would behoove us. So that's my only input.
And so you'd like the representative from Cadre to be at the joint Planning Commission Council meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're not the only. I mean, like they said, Tree Commission, it's the other people that wanted to weigh in.
I would think that that other meeting with Planning Commission, we would want representation at least from each of the main groups.
Each?
Not the whole, all of them, but maybe a representative, because they would have already had the conversations in a broader setting, and then at least have people who can weigh in. Because we've heard from 5 different groups in the last 48 hours that want to weigh in more.
So if I may, I just want to get some clarity. So the idea being is that we would have the one work session would be a joint one with the Planning Commission and the Council, but then there would be, before that Planning Commission joint and Council work session, there would be your meetings with those other groups that have weighed in as a body. And then, so at that Planning Commission Council work session, a representative from each of those would be invited to be there.
A rep, yeah.
To then present their ideas, but it would be still really mainly a work session for Planning Commission and Council.
So if we have any questions and I think we'd be seeing an updated version, is my vision of what we are today, based on those conversations with the stakeholder groups. So I was hearing from multiple groups that they just, like you, provided feedback, but hadn't had a chance until this last week to see what feedback was incorporated. And obviously they can go back through that list, and I recognize that, but I think the expectation, and it was by more than one group, was that we'd get one more chance to kind of look at it before it was going to come in front of this body. And so I want to respect that request and also have them be aware of the pretty thorough feedback that we've gotten from the development community.
And what it may be helpful for us to do is, you know, we have that version of the comments that has names on it, is just send back to those groups their own comments with here's how we address them.
That might be good.
I just think it's important for us to hear the debate, like for us
Yeah.
to hear that conversation. But I don't want to belabor the point. I mean, it's already 10 and we have.
But I just want to make sure that staff gets clear direction.
Clear direction.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
absolutely, this is obviously a lot of hard work. That's why we don't want to see it
Right.
not end well. But I have empathy for the groups because I felt the same way too. I just didn't see how, and I will say, I was really religiously sticking to the Streets That Work plan.
And when was that approved?
That was approved in September 2016.
Okay. All right.
So I want to apologize for stepping out to meet with Chief Brackney. Did you deal with the matter of, with this additional scope, you know, some amendment to the contract with Tool?
No, we didn't talk about
I got
that.
there.
We were waiting for you.
Okay. I bet.
So to Mr. Murphy's point, I think you know, the contract we have with Tool had a certain number of workshops and everything scheduled in it. By adding additional workshops, there will be additional funding that needs to be appropriated to conduct those, as well as review the additional feedback and incorporate additional feedback into the manual and put it back into an ADA compliant format, and then, you know, get it back on the website for additional review. So that's, I guess, one kind of caveat to the additional workshops. The other thing is the schedule. I know that the Planning Commission is very involved with the comprehensive plan, and so their availability could be, you know, at the very end of the year, which would be in holiday season. So this could potentially drag out into, you know, next year sometime, which if everybody's okay with that, I'm fine with that. I think it's better to take the time and do it right. And I think most people would agree with that. So I just kind of want to make sure there's that understanding that we'll need additional funding and additional time to complete everything.
So that request can formally come in front of us the next time we meet.
That's the purpose of my comment. Is it appropriate that we that you entertain a funding request at a November meeting so that they can
Keep moving.
add this additional scope?
Correct. It would be a change order in effect for their consideration at their November 5th meeting.
Okay.
And if I may, just wanted to clarify exactly the workshop format. I got a little confused there, and so still doing the Planning Commission, City Council combined workshop with a representative from each stakeholder group at that workshop.
And a meeting with those interested groups or parties before that meeting takes place. So
it's
I
really
guess
just
it'll be
two more.
Yeah.
One's a workshop maybe with those stakeholder groups, and the other one's a work session with the Planning Commission and City Council. And the one comment I just want to make, and this is something I shared with Mr. Murphy, is that, and this is not the only time this has happened, but in other kinds of big studies, Planning Commission and Council are almost like too far downstream by the time we get a chance to talk about it and look at it. And this is just maybe moving forward, we just bake our moments of interaction with the process earlier, so that it's not so much down at the end, because ultimately we do rely a lot on the Planning Commission on these matters that are born out of the comprehensive plan, and then we ultimately are the ones that live with the decisions we make.
Okay.
And then I know there was also a comment made about it actually formally being presented to the Planning Commission in a public hearing format. Is that something we want to do? I don't think that's a requirement, but I think it is not restricted. So, I mean, we can certainly do the workshops, but I didn't know if we also wanted to do like a public hearing for the Planning Commission.
I didn't feel that was necessary as long as we had the work session with the Planning Commission.
Great.
I agree with that.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. All right.
Thank you.
All right, next we have funding for West Haven Clinic Coordinator position, $85,000, first of two readings.
Oh, Miss Johnson joined the city staff. How? Welcome to the team. Mr. Murphy, you didn't inform us about
No.
I was not advised.
Surprise. I'm Kaki Dimmick, and I'm acting assistant city manager, and I'm here as the chair of the West Haven Nursing Clinic Steering Committee with
Joy Johnson, 802A Harder Drive.
And member also of the West Haven Nursing Clinic Steering Committee. The West Haven Nursing Clinic has been operating in that community since 1994. It has had multiple fiscal agencies, multiple organizations that have been involved, multiple attempts at coalition over the years, and had been operated by JABA from, I think, 2009 through 2017. And last year, JABA announced that they would no longer be serving as operational support or fiscal agency for the clinic, and barring leadership, funding, staffing, support, at that point the clinic closed. While there were other community agencies that provided short-term or temporary support there, the clinic itself ceased operations. And a coalition of folks emerged and met for probably 8 months last year with not a whole lot of success, honestly, trying to determine how to rescue the clinic. But with a great deal of fervor about rescuing the clinic and trying to figure out a way to continue to provide these services. And during that time, the School of Nursing met with a donor who agreed to provide 5 years of funding for a full-time nurse to be assigned at the clinic. And that really galvanized this group to sort of create some structure for itself, establish a steering committee, and then identify what kind of operations model we'd like to see in the clinic. The clinic has long been operated as a Paris nursing model, which is a model that dictates that you meet all of the needs of the people in front of you and not just limited to the healthcare needs of the folks who you're serving, and that you're really a community member working in concert with the community. And so we determined that we thought the best structure as a steering committee was a full-time nurse, a full-time social work coordinator / coordinator, and then nursing students who have continuously served that community, and interns potentially, and outreach workers. So we're slowly working our way towards trying to create that full staffing model. We intend it to be a blended funding project in general. We'd like to find a fiscal agent that would make good sense for the long term, and that may or may not be the city. And what we're requesting is permission to use existing funds in the Human Services Fund balance to support a coordinator in the amount of $85,000.
And is that year just 1 year?
That's 1 year. Mm-hmm.
And so is this a request that'll come back to match the 5-year funding that you have for the nurse?
I would build it into my budget for next year.
So is this for just the one position, or is this also for another position?
One full-time position with some funds for additional programming.
Okay.
Not much.
But I know there's a desire for a social worker.
This would be that social worker.
So that's the social worker?
Social worker / coordinator.
/ coordinator.
The nursing role is already filled and paid for by the nursing school.
Yes.
Okay.
For 5 years, they've made that commitment.
Okay.
The donor has.
So Ms. Johnson, you good with that?
We're good with that.
Yeah. I know we had some conversation earlier, so.
No, yeah, we're good. My hope, our hope would have been that all of it would have started on August 6th when the nurse started. And so it's kind of like the social worker coordinator is behind, because we would have hoped that they started together so that it could be a blend, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. So now we need to make sure that we get the coordinator so that they can help to coordinate and still keep the community as keep the clinic as a community clinic. Because one of the biggest fear from myself and some of the folks who were is on that coalition is that this doesn't become a UVA clinic, that it remains a community clinic where it's a safe, that it will still be a safe space, and that you're doing the holistic. You're not just doing just one thing, but you're doing a holistic thing for the whole family.
Okay.
And the steering committee for, will they be, hiring and selecting this?
I mean, technically it'll be a city employee, a long-term temp, so we'll have ultimate responsibility, but we would be actively engaging the steering committee in all of the interviews and selection process. We did the same thing with the nurse from the School of Nursing as well, and we had 2 events in which we invited the community to meet the candidates, so we would likely do the same process. Nice. Relationships are the foundation for all of the clinic services, and if we don't get that right, then we can't get the rest right.
All right, any other questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the appropriation.
Yeah, it's the first reading.
Shoot. Okay.
Thanks so much.
We want to put it on the consent agenda next meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So would that
It's fine.
where?
Yes, that would go on the consent agenda next month with the council.
Yes.
So the invite a motion part, does that need to be?
No. No, that would just be
Okay.
part of the motion with the consent agenda.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
Outstanding.
All right, next we have Piedmont Housing Alliance Community Wealth Building Program, first of 1 reading.
Good evening, Brenda Kelly, Redevelopment Manager for the record. We also have Mr. Sunshine Mathon here from representing Piedmont Housing Alliance to talk a little bit more about the program. But just to give you a little background, and I'll just kind of read from your agenda item in front of you. Friendship Court lies within the strategic investment area and the newly designated opportunity zone. Both designations focus on redevelopment strategies in targeted economically distressed areas that focus on new investments in community development, including but not limited to affordable housing, economic development, community services, job growth, and capital improvements. These improvements can only occur through collaboration and partnership between the public, nonprofit, and private sectors. The redevelopment of Friendship Court can and should be a catalyst for economic transformation for families toward the overall goal of building a proud, safe, diverse community supporting success for all. Piedmont Housing Alliance plans to launch a community wealth building program to specifically connect Friendship Court residents and job training. A long-term effort is envisioned that will begin with hiring an economic opportunity coordinator with the expertise and capacity to develop and implement a strong program. Piedmont Housing Alliance is requesting city funding for a 2-year period to support this enhancement to PHA staff. And specifically under the strategic investment plan, one of the elements addresses community wealth building. And under that, a plan objective is very specific, which says reinforce the integration of social and job advancement services and facilities. And again, under that community wealth building initiative, a recommendation and implementation tactic is to augment economic opportunity programs for low-income residents. And with that, staff is recommending that you approve allocation of existing SIA funding in the amount of $75,000 for a 2-year initiative. And I'll let Mr. Mathon address the program specifically and be here for questions.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Sunshine Mathon, and I'm here as the Executive Director of Piedmont Housing Alliance and as a partner in the planning with the Resident-Led Advisory Committee of Friendship Court as well. We are making significant progress on the redevelopment planning of Friendship Court, including recent submittals of this, to the city of our Phase 1 site plan, as well as a CIP request for infrastructure funding. However, our efforts cannot and will not be focused on housing and infrastructure alone. As has been highlighted with Ridge Schuyler's recently updated Orange Dot report, the cost of living in Charlottesville continues to outstrip wage increases for working families. As a whole, rising out of poverty in Charlottesville is extraordinarily difficult. In fact, the city ranks in the bottom 3% nationwide compared to other cities for opportunities for upward economic mobility to break through the cycles of poverty. Further, a recently released Opportunity Atlas developed by the Census Bureau, Harvard, and Brown Universities evaluates the opportunity for children to improve their outcomes in life. As an example, by the time they're in their 30s, a child growing up in the Friendship Court census tract is likely to make less than half the income that a child growing up in Greenbrier census tract. My point in highlighting all of this is to clarify that if all we do at Friendship Court is rebuild the housing, we're just going to help people be poor better. The addition of an economic opportunity coordinator will provide us the critically needed expertise and staff capacity to strengthen existing partnership opportunities, such as with the city's GO programs and Ridge Skylar's economic support efforts. But in addition, will enable us to establish new efforts and programs, including an FSS program, Family Self-Sufficiency, which is newly available, which HUD has made a recent change to make newly available to privately owned Section 8 communities like Friendship Court for the first time. As we have seen with the community organizer position at Friendship Court, the role Claudette Grant plays, officing on site is enormously important to building the trust and relationships with residents. The new Economic Opportunity Coordinator will office daily there as well. This request for the funding for the position in front of you today is intended to kickstart our community wealth building efforts. We are asking for less than half of the cost of the position over 2 years. A commitment from the city then enables us to leverage additional grant resources from foundations looking for a local match. In fact, we have 2 pending grant applications to both the Enterprise Community Partners and the Kresge Foundation, listing the hopeful city's match in those applications. My final point is that the funding request is not asking for new money. The city already annually allocates funding to the SIA for a variety of uses, as Brenda Kelly just listed out. We're asking for a small portion to be used to support residents' futures in the SIA directly.
Okay, are there questions? So you are planning to give council 2 reports, right? Is that?
If memory serves, yes.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that you would have enough information to submit more frequent?
It's possible we could submit more frequently. The concern I have is that this kind of effort takes time to really develop.
Well, not necessarily what has been the impact or outcomes, but just what's happening.
Oh, sure.
I think that would be helpful.
That makes sense. Sure,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And also, Mr. Murphy, in terms of the community overall, so like partnering with the GO program, well, one of the GO program's charge is to go out into community and draw people in to those programs. So I'm interested in where we're duplicating, efforts. If you are going to link people that the GO program is already supposed to be charged with the task of going out and finding and bringing in, then we are funding 2 agencies to do the same thing, even though it's not Friendship Court. That the GO program staff is not, focusing specifically on Friendship Court, but you would think that that would be one of the areas that would be a focal point. So just how we are maybe duplicating there.
Do you want me to respond, Mike? Or do you want?
I would just say that I feel pretty certain that we're getting applications from Friendship Court and lots of the neighborhoods that are low wealth communities, and that there are a limited number of slots in the GO programs. I would say that if PHA was successful in entering the FSS program, then there are a lot of components that would be really beneficial to residents, particularly if they're going to adopt the escrow component of that program, which will allow people, when they earn more dollars, to have those set aside in an escrow account to pour it out with them eventually. I think it's really important that somebody's working with people individually about self-sufficiency goal setting. And so I think that is something that is not a component of GO or other programs. PHA already does great work on financial literacy and credit repair. So I think that, they're definitely going deeper here. I think it's critical that we understand, is PHA successful in getting into the FSS program? I think that's a big component of this ask, and most of what adds the strength to the argument that it should be funded. I'd have more concerns if they don't get accepted by HUD, and then perhaps some discussion about what are the metrics that are in the current ask, and how do you really quantify changes in outcome over time, and particularly for this short period of time. I think that's what the FSS program really should do.
And for those who aren't aware, can you break down FSS?
So FSS stands for Family Self-Sufficiency and has been available to HUD communities for a very long time. The basic structure is that it's intended to provide an avenue for folks to increase their income and not effectively lose some of that income to increase rent, commensurate rent that comes along with that. So essentially, if a family currently pays $500 a month in rent because that's what they can afford, that's 30% of their income. If they raise their income and they would otherwise be required to pay, say, $600 in rent, that $100 difference, instead of going simply into rent, gets set aside to an escrow savings account that they then have access to when they complete the program, and that aggregates over time.
Mayor Walker, may I add something to this too? That the other element to this is the Section 3 program, and I think we've got a model already working with FAR and CRHA and Habitat with the training of residents doing construction work. But as you're trying to get units online, well, the same idea is that, and as this Friendship Court receives federal funds, it is under the Section 3 programming, is my understanding, so that you would then be required, the contractors, the subcontractors would be required to go to the residents first to offer jobs if they were qualified, and the goal would be to get them qualified so that they can compete for these jobs. They would actually have a leg up on this work if they were ready to do the work.
And that's absolutely thank you for bringing that up. We began investigating, back to the point of potentially overlapping scopes, say with the GO programs or something along those lines. We've been speaking with staff about the idea of this program since April, in fact, and had sat down with Holly and Kaki and Ridge Schuyler to make sure that we were not being duplicative in what we're trying to do at Friendship Court, and in fact intending to be augmenting existing programs, but also setting ourselves up, setting the residents up for success when it comes to new programs coming online, Section 3, FSS, etc. And candidly, this is one of the first things that I wanted to work on when I arrived. We don't have the staff capacity, even though we have a strong legacy of financial counseling and credit repair in our programming. It's city and multiple counties wide. We don't have the staff capacity to dedicate the resources to Friendship Court that it deserves and needs. Hence the ask. The other point I would make is that we are asking for a 2-year window. The goal is not to have this be a 2-year position. The goal is to ultimately have this be a long-term position. But getting this kick-started then lets me go to foundations for long-term asks to maintain this over the long term. The intention is not to come back here in 2 years and ask for more money from the city. The point is to get it kick-started so I can get it going.
So right now, are you aware of dollars that you can implement immediately if city provides this funding that you know will be matched? Are you saying that that's
so? We have 2 applications to other foundations, the Kresge Foundation, Enterprise Community Partners. We have 2 other potential foundation asks that we are investigating right now that probably won't be until the springtime. If we get the city allocation, I'm going to pull the trigger. We need the program in place even before I've gotten necessarily those other foundations to commit. But I have strong feeling I'm optimistic about those other foundation requests coming in and making it all whole. But the point is,
this funding will start at whole.
This funding will start it. That's correct.
And then I'm just trying to understand how do you? So this is like a full-time person.
It would be a full-time person, correct.
And do you feel like they're going to be at capacity? Do you think they'll have capacity to cover residents elsewhere if they're under capacity? Would we be able to?
This is a question we've chewed on many times. I think in the beginning probably that it will take time to ramp up their relationship building. But I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect within 6 months they're going to be at capacity pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. If, however, that's not the case, then opening it up to connection with other communities is absolutely okay.
I'm just considering the adjacency to other low-wealth communities.
Yeah.
So the request, would half of the request get you the first year for us to receive a report to see how things?
That's correct, but it's difficult to hire somebody on a 1-year commitment.
But by then you would know if there were other funding sources too.
True, but the funding sources that I'm aware of and that I've applied for only make it whole in the context of a 2-year period with the city funding in place.
So essentially, you can't get the other funding without our funding.
It triggers it.
Yeah,
it's connected.
And if I
And
may,
again,
the other element too was, and they were already kind of talking about how we were talking about the Growing Opportunity Program. We're talking about the PVCC's Charlottesville Works program. There's also the Charlottesville Investment Collaborative to build entrepreneurial capacity. Many of these groups, they already have people coming to them. This is a way to have someone who can get them to come to the Friendship Court residence, and actually almost develop their own, each individual family's career path, and really focus on. And actually, these conversations began in 2016 when Mary Frances Porter put together this roadmap that was also for the on-site Early Childhood Development Center and also for an integrated workforce development program. So, and Ridge Scholar was part of that group. All the people that were in these other agencies, Holly Lee was, they were part of this process that ultimately the recommendation was to have a full-time person on site coordinating the programming for the sake of the residents.
And I will remind councilors as well that we're not asking for new funding. This is funding that's already been allocated to the SIA. This is just using it for a specific purpose that it hasn't traditionally been used for.
So would you be willing to give us a at least 6 months report? Because by then you would know about other funding.
Absolutely.
Too. And then in terms of the position, hiring of the position, do you intend to have community input?
So the resident advisory committee at Friendship Court has been involved in all major hires as it relates to anything that relates to Friendship Court. So that includes, well, the advisory committee wasn't in place when Claudette Grant was hired, but the community was there and interviewed her in general. When the architect for Friendship Court was hired, the resident advisory committee did the interviewing and hiring. Same for the recent general contractor. It would be the same for this position as well.
And just for the record, I did not vote, even though I'm on the steering committee. The residents voted.
And I think that's true for Mike as well.
That first opportunity to report, I would just be kind of curious if that capacity, what your kind of gut feel is at that point in terms of what that role's capacity will be, if it could extend
Understood.
beyond this community.
Understood.
So, Mayor Walker, does that get you there with the 6-month piece?
Yeah, I don't have any other questions.
Well,
All right.
for me, I think being the fact that it's already money that you have and it's just being reallocated, it's potentially bring about new jobs. The residents want it. That's kind of, I wasn't quite clear on the portion in regards to that it's money that you already had initially, but that makes a big difference for me. You're not asking for new.
And thanks for reminding me. I did have 2 members of the advisory committee here earlier to speak on behalf, but the time
meeting was a little late,
and they
couldn't hang, man.
They have children.
One had child. So
all right, that's a good excuse.
Oh, okay. So what are we looking at? March or April? April for an update.
Whatever the council.
I think April.
April.
Yeah.
Can I make a request that 6-month time frame is related to the actual hiring date, not the date, because otherwise it might take me 2 months to hire the person. I don't know.
Okay.
Just whenever that hired, I can notify the council.
So when do you intend to?
If we can get the funding agreed on tonight, then I don't have it laid out exactly, but probably by the end of October, we'll be ready to start posting the position.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So we are at any other comments?
This one we're actually voting on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor Walker. I move that we adopt a resolution concerning the Piedmont Housing Alliance Community Wealth Building Program for funding of $75,000 from the SIA budget.
All right. Is there a
Second.
All right. Vote. All right. It carries 4-0. All right. Next, we have the Food Equity Initiative transfer of funds, $65,000. First of one reading.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about the Food Equity Initiative. My name is Rebecca Schmidt. I'm the Population Health Manager with the Thomas Jefferson Health District. And with me I have Jeanette Abingnader with City Schoolyard Garden, and also Dr. Denise Bonds with the Health Department. And I'll just wait for a moment while the handouts are passed around.
They're not all colored.
It's like a 3-page.
3 pages.
It's 3 pages. Did you all get 3 pages?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So food equity means that everyone gets what they need to have sufficient, accessible, nutritious, and affordable food. In response to a directive from Council last April, the Health Department has been researching best practices in food equity across the country and working with city staff and local community groups to draft the proposal you have in front of you this evening. The proposal includes a brief overview of some of the data that demonstrates the need for a systems approach to food equity, as well as clear activities and outcomes tied to the funding. As part of our research, we identified the benefits of a Healthy Corner store approach and will be working with Cooperative Extension and other local partners on a model in the city. However, what we found is that a single program will have only a limited impact on food equity. Instead, the most successful cities across the country use a systems model that includes community-driven solutions and voice in both planning and implementation, a systems approach that supports multiple food access points, government involvement and commitment, and a balance of programmatic and policy work, thus the food equity approach. The memo includes an overview of the approach. However, I wanted to highlight a few additional points. This approach would show Charlottesville as a leader not only as a tourist foodie city, but in collaborative, multi-sector work to improve our food system from production to disposal of food, and a commitment to including residents impacted by food insecurity in this work. This initiative aligns not only with the city's strategic plan, but with national best practice. More than 80 cities nationwide include food in their planning. With Charlottesville City Schools Equity Forum, which will be happening next week, with the city manager's focus on equity in city government, and with the redevelopment of several affordable housing communities, where it will be important to have someone able to speak to the food environment. It also aligns with the Community Health Improvement Plan and assessment process, as well as the value statement that was presented at the beginning of this meeting with many community member signatures and organizations. This proposal does not reinvent the wheel or start a new program, although changes to programs and policies are some of the anticipated outcomes. Instead, it is a strength-based approach building on existing work and community assets. The city is a critical partner in this work, and nationally, without government involvement, these initiatives have been challenging. This is because of the critical linkages with different city departments, from Parks and Recreation to city planning, and certainly to the school systems. Both sustainability and accountability are built into this request. Requested funds are for initial year to meet the goals of assessment and planning. Local foundations have already matched this funding, $25,000 each from 2 local foundations, and it's tied to concrete outcomes. And to Mayor Walker's point, I know the initiative would be happy to provide reports out at any interval that's helpful. What this initiative might do is identify ways to expand the youth food justice interns that are currently working within the network, the Charlottesville Food Justice Network, and that support food justice organizations across the city. It also, I know there was some interest in the Baltimore Food Advocates Program in Baltimore, which does some of the similar things that this proposal would do in terms of educating community members and creating opportunities for their voices to be heard in both how programs are developed and implemented. Community scale problems require community level investment to solve, and healthy communities start with healthy citizens. We can't have strong, equitable communities without a strong, equitable food system. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there was a great deal of support in regards to this measure earlier this meeting, excuse me. And I wholeheartedly understand. As I asked the young lady, ma'am, tell me your name one more time. Miss Bingham. As I asked Miss Bingham earlier, and she eloquently responded, I had some reservations in regards to people feeling as if this is a program in which tells people this is how you should eat, kind of mandating people's food. So what will you all do to ensure that it doesn't come off that way to the community?
Sure.
Because perception is often reality, so, you know.
Yeah, I think a key part of this is actually the initial ask from council was to look at the Healthy Corner Stores model and how that could be implemented in Charlottesville. And while that's a great program and model nationally, what we found is that we really needed community voice at the table when we're developing programs. So this initiative actually is an investment in doing broader community outreach and engagement around programs and increasing their effectiveness because they'll have community voice.
Was there community voice in the creation of this portion, or we're still in the early
so
stages?
I think the value statement that was shared during public comment is a good example of that. Also during our community health assessment process, over 2,000 community members across our district were engaged, over 300 in Charlottesville. And that identified healthy eating and active living as a priority for our community.
Those 300 from Charlottesville, do we know kind of what neighborhoods or where they live?
I don't have that information, but I think that's a great question. And I think that's why community voice is such an important part of this proposal. So it's built in because I think we need more of it.
Okay. Thank you.
You referenced two other funding sources. Is that to extend the program beyond this? So you said 25,000 each from two, so that's 50,000. Where are you allocating those funds, and are those dependent on us?
So I will defer to Jeanette Abbey-Nader to answer that question.
And a question about the partner agencies. Could you explain what you expect to see differently than you see now? So you all, if they're partner agencies, you are already meeting, something is already happening, and what will change with this new initiative? That's something that I haven't been clear on since.
Okay. So
that's a question for you. Okay.
Yeah, to address the funding, no, that's the $50,000 is for the what's currently happening.
Okay.
So it will be matched for this year with the city's funds. Your question was if it would extend it to next year?
I was trying to understand right now, what is that money going towards, or what was it planned to go towards in the future? There's other funds from these other two contributors. Those $50,000. I'm sorry, I'm still confused.
The overall budget is around like up to $300,000, depending on what projects we take on. So the two foundations that have donated $25,000 each are going towards that overall budget, and the city budget would contribute to that as well.
Okay.
And then to Mayor Walker's question, so we've, up until we received these two grants over the past few months, the network has been working on a volunteer basis. We had a federal grant through the USDA Community Food Projects Program in 2015 and 17 that launched the Charlottesville Food Justice Network. And then when that grant ended in August of 2017, the groups have just been donating their time, and City Schoolyard Garden has been funding the initiative in terms of staff time. So this funding will allow additional staff time to be funded, and it will also allow for some of the initiatives around community meetings, assessments for the city council engagement. And we haven't been engaged too much at the government level. So it will allow us to engage at that level in terms of looking at the different departments in the government and giving feedback around that. Do you want to add anything to that piece?
Yeah, I would just say the policy piece I think is really important to be able to work across departments, and the engagement with city government I think is a really critical part of that. So having access to be able to talk to city staff in multiple departments, and also to bring community voice and feedback on policies before they're implemented, specifically around the comprehensive plan rewrites, but also looking at additional programs that might be needed. I know there's often questions about that. We want to make sure that any programs that are proposed are community driven, and I can speak more in depth.
So some of the comments that I sent through email about like training food advocates in the community, that we would pay during training and pay to be the connections to the community and getting the feedback that you are asking for. But food trucks, partnerships with farms, like we know that there's a need. So that's another space where I've been confused. So there's been a need. There have been, organizations that have been doing things in pockets, but it sounds like also there's a partnership, so it hasn't necessarily been in silos. You're just trying to strengthen what this partnership looks like. But I am interested in like what other than the dialogue, what will happen this year. And then I have the next question is from the $49,000 to the 15, what that extra $15,000, then where did that come in at?
So I think, and Khaki here, yeah, she's right there. Khaki can probably talk to the additional fund.
I just asked the question when we were meeting, whether the amount of money that the health department had left on the table for, I believe, rents, at least last year, was sufficient to meet the needs of the project they proposed. And so it was 65 was the number that would meet their needs, and so that's how that happened. So I just asked the question.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I should have been writing when you were speaking. I want to make sure.
Well, to speak to the initiative about like what more would happen, I think I didn't see your specific comments about community advocates, but it's definitely in line with what we've been talking about. And Rebecca mentioned the youth food interns. So we've already started that with a teenager level. I'm sorry, it's so late. I don't know how y'all do this. Stay alert. So we have a food intern, youth food justice intern program where we fund youth across the different organizations that are part of the network with a paid internship in the summer to do some of this, to not only work in the local gardens, but to learn about food justice and to help design a vision for food justice for our city. And so I think that would very much complement a program to move into community advocacy for residents as well. For this year, the program goals outlined they came out of our conversations with several of the counselors as well as the community in terms of what would be the first steps. And there was a great interest in having research and assessment around what kind of strategies would work best in our community. So there would be a focus on that with the proposed plan that comes out in terms of 3 to 5 years. What would we need to do in Charlottesville to build food justice across these different individual programs that you mentioned? So that will be one strong deliverable. Another one would be continuing this youth food justice intern program. Another one would be engaging community in this discussion. So having community meetings where food was provided, babysitting was provided, those types of avenues so that we could have these conversations. And we're doing this at a very small scale level through the Urban Agricultural Collective of Charlottesville. And what we'd like to do is use these resources to invest in a very robust effort that includes community outreach advocates and those types of initiatives. To the question that you asked earlier, Dr. Bellamy, around whether or not community input has already been made, we've been focusing on the model that each of the organizations that are part of the network are bringing the voice from their community. So City Schoolyard Garden, we have several meetings with parents. We engage youth in helping to design that, and then we bring that forward. The New Roots program of the International Rescue Committee has done a couple photo story projects and different projects with their refugee growers to get their feedback about what they'd want. Local Food Hub has talked to their growers. So each of our organizations have been responsible. The Urban Agricultural Collective of Charlottesville has been holding community meetings to bring that voice in through the collective network. That has been our approach to date to help design this. Yeah.
And I think also to the questions, the community food advocates who are paid to engage, I think that program could certainly come out of this next year, but it would need additional funding and would have recommendations. The reason that this is not a program is because there's an opportunity to really deepen the network and actually sustain it, frankly. At this point, it has been volunteer, and it hasn't, I think the concern is that we need someone who can speak to policy and can really meaningfully engage community members, and that this funding is the basis for that.
So what's the annual budget, not for what your request is tonight, but it's not 300. That's the overall budget for your entire program, or is it just for this?
It's for the Food Equity Initiative and the Urban Agricultural Collective of Charlottesville, which I don't believe is included in here. The urban farming on the ground projects at Friendship Court, South First Street, and 6th Street. So those combined programs. That program, you all are familiar with that program? It grows food for the community that's shared with the residents.
So this particular program that you're asking for funding for tonight, that is $50,000 from outside sources, and you're asking for $65,000 from the city. And so would that be in line with what future requests would look like, or when would you know what future projections look like?
I think we have in the plan, June would be the time when we would submit a proposed funding schematic moving forward. We initially had prepared to propose this much earlier in the year, but I think we could probably actually still keep to that timeline. And those, we would not be, we feel that the city engagement, and other cities have shown that participation from the city is very important, but that we would also bring a lot of matching and partnership support to that, as we have over the past year.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Yes, I have a couple. During the Community Matters, Ms. Bingham gave a couple of stats that kind of linger in your ear. So 1 in 6 are hungry in the city, and 4 times as many black residents are likely to die by diabetes than white. So are you going to be, how are you going to be then having the resources to start understanding how you're getting at those kinds of disparities? You are going to be in partnership with the health department. They are the keeper of the community health improvement plan. They do have lots of data. Will you be looking at measuring impacts in any way at some point? Or is this just a matter of adding one more coordinator to just get everybody better communicating to each other? Is there an actual outcome that you're looking for?
So I think, again, I would point to the outcomes in the packet. This is more of a 1-year pilot to see, again, what the recommendations will be with more community voice, and also with a lot of the policy initiatives that are before council right now, and that with a lot of the redevelopment that's happening. I think in terms of health outcomes, we usually talk more in terms of 5 to 10 to 20 years down the line, to be honest. I don't want to oversell that point.
So this is again the infrastructure that you need.
Yeah, I will say one of the things when we first started talking about this project, when the health district was asked to do the research, it was noted that there really wasn't a precedent at City Council for food initiatives. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we've done is made recommendations around the city's comprehensive plan on where, Chantel did a lot of research on where food justice language could be implemented in the plan. And that was a big community effort. So that was the kind of like first step that this pilot project can do, so that we have that language within the city's plan so that programs can be supported. In terms of evaluation, I will say each of the organizations in the Charlottesville Food Justice Network have rigorous evaluations to whatever degree they're able. So when City Square Garden had the federal grant through the Community Food Projects program, you're required to have an external evaluator. So we were able during those 2 years to do some intensive evaluation around our outputs and our impacts. And so each organization will continue to do that, and we would like to have some evaluation across all of those organizations, because here we have so many nonprofit groups in Charlottesville working along the food system, and we would like to see if that's having impact, across. So that's one of our goals that would be in that plan, is how can we do a comprehensive evaluation that can help us see how do you really move the needle on hunger, regardless of, and food insecurity, with all of the programs that we have. So that would definitely be one of the things we would propose for future activities.
And that was one of my other points that I've been making over the months, because I think I've been the one holding this up, but, well, not think, but I haven't been clear on the fact that, I mean, I remember when I was in school that this research was being done. I also remember being a part of the Quality Community Council with Karen Waters, and these discussions were being had. So I just don't understand why we don't have enough information in terms of evaluation to have something in place by now. And what I hear you all saying is that we'll be working with the same partner agencies that have been the agencies that have been receiving funding to do this, that we're still at a point where we don't have enough information.
Well, I thought that was in reference to information around like health outcomes, right? Like disease prevention, and those take 5 to 20 years.
Yeah, no, not just so. I mean, that based on what I've seen in my lifetime here, that, I mean, we should have that too from somewhere. But also in terms of just getting people access instead of, and that's what I was kind of asking for this year, instead of another year of evaluation, a year where we were actually putting things and implementing initiatives, and that based on what I know, and I don't know a lot, but I felt like we should have things in place for all the years that this has been on, on the radar.
If I'm understanding your question or your comment, I mean, we do have so many things in place that are providing access. So UACC, for example, last year provided 18,000 pounds of fresh produce to the communities with whom they work. City Schoolyard Garden provided 24,000 healthy snacks to youth. And, we have those kinds of short-term interventions that are happening, and the goal of the network is to pull those together to amplify their impact. $65,000 is not going to develop a program by any means that could further that, but I thought what this council wanted was an opportunity to show how to create cohesion amongst those networks for an amplified impact. Does that make sense?
Well, if I might interject, because I was around 18 months ago. It was first born out of the result of the Maps to Health report and the outcomes that demonstrated the food insecurity, and that we were embarking on research with a Healthy Corner Store initiative, because that is what came up out of that report. And so and I know Mr. Murphy and Mr. Chris Engel were researching that, but along with the health department. But then the health department came up with the realization that actually the best approach is a systems approach, not a one particular program that that we don't know yet would be the right. It's not going to be a silver bullet. So that's where that came from. in many ways, we're trying to be partnering with the health department and your expertise to know what the right approach is, because we know we need to do something that is effective. And this is where your memo suggested to us that that systems approach was what you needed to do first before you could put in place an actual program that I'm understanding Mayor Walker would like to see.
Right. And I think, so one of the reasons that we're before you today and asking for city engagement and support in this is that there have been initiatives, certainly, in the past, and I have one in front of me from 2013, the Healthy Eating, Active Living Resolution, which was before council and was passed, but with no funding. And it outlines several of the things that the city would like to commit to regarding workplace wellness, healthy food access, and implementation. And I think the important piece of this is that this would be funding someone and a network of organizations that would be accountable and would come back before council and report out on those outcomes. And I think to your point about the program, we could certainly have additional programs that come out of this, but at this point, it looks like we do have a lot of programs, and what's needed is actually better coordination among the programs, identification of where the needs are that are not being met, and then also expanding that to the business sector, to city government, and to non-traditional partners. So,
all right. Are there any other questions?
I will say the amount of community support earlier meant a great deal, and it seems as if there's a lot of support behind it. So we'll see. Why y'all looking like that in the back?
All right. Is there any other questions? No. All right. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt a resolution for food equity initiative funding support at $65,000.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. And vote?
No, I don't care about who first or second.
All right. It carries 3-1.
Thank you. I would also be very interested in knowing the types of reporting that you all would like back around this project. Yeah, at whatever point.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have the ordinance to rezone 1206 Carlton Avenue from an R2 two-family residential to an R3 multifamily residential, second of 2 reading.
Mayor, City Council, Matt Alfley, City Planner, Neighborhood Development Services. There's no presentation tonight. This is kind of a carryover. You held a public hearing, your last meeting on the rezoning. So tonight is, you can take action on that rezoning. The one thing I did want to point out was on Friday, you received an updated proffer statement from the applicant that changed one of the phrasing on the affordable portion of the proffer from the original proffer said up to 10 years, and they have changed the proffer to for a period of 10 years. And this was also sent to the city attorney. The applicant believes this is not a substantial change that would require it to be sent back to Planning Commission. So that might be something city attorney wants to weigh in on, if he feels it is a material change or if this proffer in front of you can be discussed tonight as part of your deliberations. And again, this is just for the rezoning. Should the rezoning be approved, the SUP component of this would come back at your next meeting. So tonight would just be the rezoning portion of this.
Just for my own understanding of this process, 'cause I've seen times where we've seen these things together. It's like, how do we decide the order of operations with this?
Well, if you vote against the rezoning, you can't vote on the SUP.
Right. But sometimes
Yes.
we do these things in unison where we've, like within 5 minutes, kind of one leads to the other. I've just seen the plan. I'm just curious.
Correct, and they could be done that way. I'm not sure why the SUP didn't make it into this packet, but
I've sat through the meetings talking about the SUP, and it just does provide more context in terms of what the vision is. And so I was just curious as to why it's separated. But
correct, and I guess one of the options City Council, I guess, can take too is they could table this if they wanted the SUP to come back with the rezoning at the next meeting. That would be also an option.
I'm not interested in tabling it. Let's just get it. Let's go.
And I just need a procedural question answered. Didn't we already move to not approve the rezoning?
No, at your last meeting there was a discussion, since this required 2 readings, and there was a discussion about should it be placed on the consent agenda or not, and the council, I think, unanimously did not want this placed on the consent agenda. You wanted it as a separate action item.
But it would have been put on the consent agenda if we had approved it.
Well, that was the first reading at the last one. So if you had, in fact, said, yes, just place it on the consent agenda, it would have been subject to the motion and vote of this consent agenda tonight. And instead, the council wanted to consider this as a separate action item.
And I guess I'm just curious for the future, based on our discussion, if our discussion leads us to a path where it looks like we aren't going to move forward, could we go ahead and make a motion to deny on the first reading?
You can do that tonight.
Not just
yes.
Could we have done that? I'm not saying we would have. I knew I wanted to hear more from the public and give this chance for the public to weigh in. That's why I was waiting for the second reading.
Not in your current practice. It's right now. Land use matters require 2 readings,
even if there's not interest in the project.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, is there any questions from council? Discussion. All right.
I mean, I think Mr. Signer said this last meeting. I really see this as a project that does, in many ways, achieve what we're trying to do. I don't feel that for this location, and given all the other things that have happened and are be expected to happen, that I really just struggle with making this shift from an R2 to an R3 in the zoning. So. But I just don't feel like I'm certainly have listened and I hear the arguments that are being made in terms of I don't want us to be a car-centric community, and I think we need to be more thinking about people versus cars. But just having looked at this site and I went back over again today just to try to give it one more shot in my head. But I just think that we really have a lot of strain in that area of our community, and it's not the end of that strain. And there's a lot of by right that's going to make it even more cumbersome.
And if I may just add that the Planning Commission voted against this, and one of the reasons was because there was a lack of sidewalk infrastructure. So if we're going to be, you can't have a walkable environment without walkable sidewalks. And I just think the way I expressed myself last time was that it's a rezoning, so the public does not know that this is coming. It is purely driven from the individual owner, him or herself. The zoning is supposed to be a document that people can rely upon as being that's what's going to be happening in their neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. The comprehensive plan should be the guide that people go to when they're making a decision about a rezoning or a special use permit. At least a special use permit is in the zoning. Contrary to what has been said in the past, a special use permit is the zoning. It is not a breaking of the zoning rule. So this is kind of a unilateral action that's done without public process other than public hearing, but it's not like a charrette. It's not like it's been a comprehensive plan update where people are involved with public meetings. And so I find it, to do a rezoning has to be a very high bar to be successful, and it has to meet that comprehensive plan map and intent, and I don't see it in this case. and a special use permit is allowed within R2, and it would have gotten up to 4 units. That would have been a different story. It's in the zoning. This is a rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So you're not in favor?
All right, so any other discussion? But there was a public hearing at Planning Commission, and there was a public hearing here.
Right.
Right, the last meeting.
Right, there were
Okay.
public hearings, so that's like the basic minimum of engagement. So that was done. We didn't not do that, but this
But
is...
did you all go out into the neighborhood? Was that what? No.
We submitted we did the neighborhood meeting. We sent letters out to neighbors. We didn't necessarily
Okay.
walk door to door. I mean, actually, I said Kelsey went and talked to some of the neighbors
Mhm.
after some of our hearings, but we did not go door to door per se.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we had a petition presented to us last meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. So vote.
We had to make a motion first.
So I move not to adopt an ordinance approving a request to rezone the property located at 1206 Carlton Avenue from R2 residential 2-family to R3 residential multifamily.
I'll second.
And vote.
So what?
So we're moving to deny.
We're moving to deny. That's okay.
All right. So that carries 4-0. All right, so next we have participatory budgeting. Update report.
Good evening, City Council. I just wanted to provide a quick update on where we are with this process of getting a pilot going. So if you remember, as part of the FY19 budget, Council adopted $100,000 to fund a participatory budgeting pilot program. And as part of developing this pilot, city staff is recommending working with Floricane, a vendor that the city has under contract for facilitation services, and specifically Ebony Walden, who has also facilitated other community engagement-oriented initiatives for the city. So among the goals of the pilot participatory budgeting approach in Charlottesville is the design of a process and solution that is scalable and sustainable, and that invites genuine engagement and participation from citizens, community organizations, and city employees. So Floricane's approach would be to develop this pilot is designed to facilitate a small, diverse group of stakeholders through the creation of a detailed plan that would allow the city to launch the pilot process in early 2019. And specifically, and I'll just go through these quickly, city leadership would identify 4 to 6 members of a design group that would scope out the overall engagement and design process for the pilot. We'd hold several planning sessions with the initial group to scope out the process, and we would invite additional representatives if necessary, if the design group would like that. And then Floricane would help facilitate working sessions with the design group to establish clear outcomes and parameters for the budget for the pilot program, and that would include desired outcomes, a process to communicate to and engage the public in the pilot, a process to collect, identify, and select a project to fund as part of the pilot, specific steps to implement the pilot, and a methodology to evaluate its success. Floricane anticipates that this would begin in late October, and that we would have a pilot process completed by late December or early January, with which we could then implement an actual program and go forward. And then staff can decide after that if we can do that part internally or if we need continued outside assistance to do that. And to address an email question earlier that Councilor Signer asked, do we need to outsource this? Staff would recommend yes, we do outsource this part. We think Floricane and Ebony have the desired kind of skills to help city staff develop this process, and then we would be working to then create that internal capacity to carry this process forward. So we wouldn't be giving this process to Floricane, it would be a process that we would carry forward as city staff. And hopefully, at a meeting we had recently, we could use this process. It would be broad enough to use it in other types of engagements, not just in the participatory budgeting process itself, but it would maybe be a larger engagement process. So I think for the amount of money, this is well worth the investment, and it would make, we think city staff, and Matthew Murphy is going to be working with me on this as well very closely, that this would be a good win for the city, and that this would guarantee some success in this, and could get it done quicker. We're coming up on the budget process. People are going to be really busy. I'm short one analyst. I'll be hiring soon, so there's a lot of elements going on right now that having this outside help would really help a lot with this process. So.
And it's really just for this first few
it's just
months,
for this
just
first
to get
step.
this identified, and
right.
then we're really handing it off largely to
we will
the community.
Hand it off. That's right. They'll
largely
hand it
to
off
the
to the city and the community
support.
after that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we do have some community members who want to be involved, and I know that so Serena Gruya has just started. This was in the paper this morning with the Walker
That is
School.
a question. So how is Matt Slats and Serena Gruya and I think Michael Payne was involved? Like how is that the group that brought this before us going to be involved with this?
So they can choose to be one of the members of this community group. I think we need to make sure we have a pretty diverse group that includes people that not only have maybe areas of expertise, but that don't. So we need to make sure it's a really diverse group. So of course those folks are interested, but we need to make sure we open it up to others as well. And you all can help us identify those folks. I think I'll be talking to Mr. Murphy about this, and we'll be working on who those people could be. Now, this is just a preliminary group.
Right.
Remembering that when it gets launched in January, it's a much larger commitment by the community. So there's lots of opportunities for lots of folks to get involved after that. But I think for the small group even, we need to try to make sure and we make it as diverse as possible, even though it's a small group.
So would you be coming to us with a resolution that explains to us the composition of this process and body that we need to vote on, or is that just something that's going to come to Mr. Murphy's office?
Yeah, I think we can. I think after, if you all
council driven.
Sure, if you all are fine with the way we want to approach this, I'll be talking to Ebony this week. We'll come up with a plan, a timeline. I'll be speaking to Mr. Murphy about some ideas of who might be on that initial group, and I think we'll just be reaching out to you all with some regular updates. I think maybe as we get into this process, maybe sometime in, November, December, we can come back with an update for you all, a public update, saying where we are. Then, of course, when this is completed in January, mid-January, then we can come back, of course, and have the presentation that talks about the whole process and what has been arrived at and how we're going to proceed from there. So.
And this strategy really, I think, alleviates some. I know there was a lot of concerns, and I shared some of them about that we really are applying as much of this $100,000 as possible to actually the projects.
So this $5,000 will not come out of that pool. So I have some facilitation money that's part of the strategic plan pool, so I can pull from that. So we're going to keep the $100,000 as intact as possible, which I believe is the intent of council when you all adopted that money as part of the adopted budget. So.
And which neighborhood is this focusing on?
We don't know yet. See, that process is going to help us arrive at how we decide, how that is decided. So this is just a preliminary, kind of backing up a step. How do we have a process for success going forward to actually do that work? So all that will be discussed, and you all, of course, will need your input on that when we get to that point.
I have a question for Councilor Bellamy.
Yes,
Councilor Bellamy, you were the one that really pushed for this earlier on. Are you comfortable with this?
Yes, ma'am. Great job.
Yeah. I was part of the most recent main meeting, and I think it really solves a lot of the concerns that a lot of us had, and I think it sets us up for success because this really is a pilot, and we want it to be successful to allow it to show that we can repeat this and grow this. And so I think there's certainly commitment from those community members that kind of initiated it, but at the same time, they are certainly ready to put this in the hands of our public.
Great.
Okay. Mayor Walker has some. No. What? She has some ideas about the participatory budgeting.
No, I don't have any at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Great. Thanks.
So we don't need to do anything.
Nope. And we're almost.
All right. Last, and we apologize. Report Social Services Advisory Board annual update.
You guys have a PowerPoint?
There is a
Oh, Sarah's coming.
Oh, Mrs. Brazelton, take care of it for you.
Here it comes. Thank you. Good night, everyone. My name is Christine Goff. I am the chair of the advisory board for the Charlottesville Department of Social Services. I've been on the board for about 3 years and was voted as the chairperson earlier this year. I'd like to recognize two of our board members that are here tonight, Mayor Walker and Lisa Brown. And I'd like to thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to speak and to present to you all this evening. Obviously, the City of Charlottesville vision is to be one community filled with opportunity, and the mission is to provide services that promote equity and an excellent quality of life in our community. The city's strategic plan goals that align with social services are goals number 1, 2, and 5, an inclusive community of self-sufficient residents, a healthy and safe city, and a well-managed and responsive organization. Our largest programs within social services here in the city of Charlottesville are listed here on this slide. Child care assistance, temporary assistance to needy families, Medicaid, adult protective services, child protective services, family engagement, adoption, supplemental nutrition assistance programs, the Virginia Initiative for Employment, Not Welfare, family access to medical insurance security, adult services, foster care prevention, foster care, and also fostering futures. In this year's report, the advisory board chose to focus on Medicaid expansion and trauma-informed care initiatives. Sorry. I don't like this clicker, and this clicker doesn't like me. I was doing the top, and it's not going anywhere. There it goes. Sorry. You want me to just tell you when I need it to move forward? Okay. Go which way? Thank you. Okay, cool. So yes, Medicaid expansion is coming, and we are estimating 2,100 new Medicaid cases. With Medicaid expansion, the eligibility requirements include being a Virginia resident aged 19 to 65, not already in or eligible for Medicare, and a household income of less than 138% of the federal poverty level, which varies by household size. Automatic enrollment for people with serious mental illnesses and family planning coverage. Again, it will be automatic. Those individuals will automatically qualify and be automatically enrolled. Virginia residents can begin applying for expanded Medicaid on November the 1st of 2018 with a start date of January 1st of 2019. Listed here on this slide are different ways that you can apply for the Medicaid program, and additionally, Charlottesville Social Services continues to process all benefit applications received in person, by mail, and retrieved from the online portal, which is Common Help. And trauma-informed care. As part of the city's strategic plan, one of the social services objectives is to become a trauma-informed agency. Across the country, trauma-informed care is being recognized as a necessary and important component of healing and recovery for children, families, and larger systems. In 2017, area organizations, including Charlottesville Social Services, Charlottesville City Schools, and 11 other community partners, came together to form the Charlottesville Area Trauma-Informed Community Network. One of the network's primary goals is to provide educational opportunities to raise awareness about the prevalence of trauma in our community. Acting on this goal, the network invited trauma expert Dr. Allison Sampson Jackson to present a lecture at the Paramount on adverse childhood experiences, often referred to as ACEs, and how they can have lifelong impacts on behaviors, physical and mental health, and relationships. Here listed on this slide are some of the adverse childhood experiences. There was a study done by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in collaboration with Kaiser Permanente. 2/3 of adults taking the survey report at least one adverse childhood experience, and 25% of adults surveyed reported experiencing 3 or more. Additionally, it's important to note that adverse childhood experiences cut across all boundaries of language, race, culture, income levels, and faith. These are consequences of trauma informed with ACEs. We have early death, disease, disability, and social problems, adoption of health risk behaviors, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, disrupted neurodevelopment, and adverse childhood experiences. Washington State is a leader in trauma-informed care. There was a book and a movie called Paper Tigers that many of you all have had the opportunity to read the book or see the movie that follows the community of Walla Walla, Washington, and how they have become a trauma-informed community. Several months ago, 4 individuals from the Charlottesville Department of Social Services were fortunate enough to be able to go out to a conference in Walla Walla to get some one-on-one training to bring back to the department. On October 31st, all social service staff within the city of Charlottesville will be attending a training that's going to be led by the 4 individuals that did go out to Walla Walla. One of the greatest things that we can provide our community with is resilience. And resilience are protective factors against the power of adverse childhood experiences, and they're known as resiliencies. People who experience trauma can improve mental and physical health and strengthen relationships when they build upon the resilience factors in their lives. Some examples of resilient factors are to develop social and support networks, expressing and validating your feelings, and holding family meetings and holding everyone in the family accountable for what they can do to make the family better. You can start with a small child that, can make their bed. It might not be perfect. It might not pass military inspection, but it's something that they can do and they can be proud of. And that praise that you give them can build up their self-esteem to where they'll want to do more and do better. And that is the end of our presentation. Do you all have any questions or comments? Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for staying so late and for presenting to us.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? No.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right. So next, any other business? No? Okay. Matters by
Blair was
okay. I'm sorry.
trying to signal something.
If I could ask the council, the topic came up tonight. Would you want our office to look at a process in which you don't have to have 2 separate meetings to decide land use applications, such as rezonings, or do you prefer having the 2 where you meet once, have your public hearing, then come back and take action at the next meeting?
For me,
I'd like that one.
For me, it's more like in the case of this, I felt like I thought the conversation was clearly showing that we really weren't supporting it.
Right.
But the reason I'm fine with giving it a space is that if there's a whole, like if this is the first time the community is really hearing about it, and it gives us a chance to hear from them, and it did give us a chance, and it just reaffirmed my position, the things that I heard, and so in other cases it could do the opposite, and so I wouldn't want to be too hasty, I guess.
And if I recall, wasn't this because we weren't able to achieve a joint council planning commission public hearing?
It was, and that's
because usually this wouldn't happen, because we would have had the public hearing together, but we didn't have enough of.
That would have been the first reading.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
So that's why.
I think additionally, right, you have a little bit of change in practice because we have a new city attorney, John. Mr. Blair has a little bit different perspective on whether you make that motion in the first meeting. So Mr. Brown had always instructed you make the motion, and in this case, you'd have made a motion at that first meeting, and then it probably would have been on consent as a denial. I think in this new way of thinking about it, if you don't make the motion at meeting 1, right, then you're not able. If you're not feeling like you have that consensus behind an approval, it's really only in a denial that you find yourself in this position, right? And so I don't know how you tackle that, but it's this change in interpretation by the city attorney.
All right.
Dr. Bellamy, you have something? No.
All right. Okay. One thing about social services, there is a report that we're going to be looking at, right? Did something come out recently?
I provided council, I think in September, with a report that was done by a UVA professor and students about racial disparities in the child welfare system. And I had suggested when I conveyed that it was probably appropriate for a work session rather than a council meeting, and probably combining that with some kind of review of what have we done in juvenile DMC, what's happening right now with the adult criminal justice study, and what did this most recent look at the child welfare system yield. And hopefully by the time we schedule that, since that report from UVA folks is absent, like next steps or recommendations, then that would be accompanied by our staff telling you, okay, it says this, what are we going to do?
Okay. All right, thank you. So now we're at Matters by the Public. Is there anyone that would like to speak?
Mark Cavett, 400 Altamont Street. Some time ago I mentioned that be wary about applicants, especially developers, coming before you all and making certain claims. A lot of times things get twisted to put them in a good light. And tonight I heard applicant for 1206 come before you, and there was a question came up about letters or notification to the neighborhood. And Karen Katz went by, did some canvassing a couple weeks ago and knocked on doors, and there was maybe some letters that went out about a year ago, but that was about it. And they only went to property owners, and there's a lot of property in that area that are absentee landlords. And so a lot of the people in the neighborhood were never notified what was being planned for that location. So I wanted to bring that out to you all. There needs to be a better way of also notifying people, not just property owners, but the renters in a given area should also be notified about a possible change in the zoning of property near them. So I would like to make that recommendation. I'm glad you all made the decision that you made tonight, because I think parking is going to be a serious problem there, with the, especially when you consider the other projects that are being planned for the area. And also that road right there is, very narrow. It was a road I used to travel quite a bit. And a lot of times I knew that when I traveled, I had to pull over when another car was coming towards me from the other way. And that's just going to get worse and worse as we see more and more development in that area, especially with the Riverbend development that's planned for that area. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? No, one quick, are you all who approved the food justice, are you all going to specify what the reporting needs to look like?
Yeah, I think we all should.
Okay. All right.
I apologize, it's late, and I do apologize.
It's early for us.
But,
It is early, we're doing well.
It's early, man.
But Mayor, I just want to congratulate you on your future attempt to try to control the lights on people addressing the council. It would be wonderful, though, if at the same time somehow you could try to control the outburst and the yelling and the screaming that goes on behind us, so people cannot properly address and properly use their 3 minutes. And apparently tonight, when I was standing waiting because of the outburst, I had a grin or a smile on my face. I just wanted to say that in no way was that meant to be any disrespect to the council. It was my way of controlling my sheer anger and rage, so I did not turn around and shout something that I know I would have regretted. So again, I apologize. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? So I'm not in the business of trying to control people. So I'll just put that out there, but I will be, and we still ended up out, earlier than we probably thought we would get out, so, okay. So hopefully control is not what I'm looking to do, but.
And I've just raised before, and I recognize that we signed up for some of this when we came up here, like when we decided to take this on. I just feel that when staff is being attacked is when I do have issue with it, and I'm just trying to figure out the way to weigh in on that, because that's just when not only staff but when other members of the community are being addressed in ways that I think are disrespectful. It's to direct us that way is one thing. Again, we ran for office, we knew we were putting ourselves in front of the public, and I get it, and I've gotten a lot thicker skin over the last year, but I do draw the line, and I'm just struggling with how to deal with that, because I do feel like there was some members of staff and the community that were not treated respectfully, and I'm just trying to figure out how we as a body can help support that becoming a more healthier environment for them.
And I guess the only thing I'll add is that at some point, when we don't say something and the behavior is either bullying or juvenile, what my concern is then we are as a body condoning that behavior as a way of getting things the way you want them. And I'm not happy about children saying this, and I just hope the public begins to treat each other with some respect. That's all, including us, just as human beings.
And I've said before that my attempt to give this some space has been because even though meetings have been very civil in the past, the results of those meetings have been complete disaster for people's lives in the area, especially if you were Black and low income. So civil meetings where nobody's yelling or being disrespectful, but at the same time, the policies that has been implemented clearly based on where we are as a town have not been civil. So we have to also acknowledge that, and that's what people have been frustrated about.
And I think that frustration comes out. Like, I mean, I sit here even tonight, and I know I said, like, come on, like, I was saying to people, it's a bit much, but at the same time, we have to understand people are frustrated, and we can't. I think it's the wrong thing for us to try and say that you should not be able to express yourself, because everyone expresses themselves differently. Now, does it make for sometimes people? It creates an environment in which is uncomfortable for some. Yes, I'm not gonna say I always like it, but I don't think we should be in the business of kind of monitoring people's behavior, because most of these individuals are adults and are still suffering from a very traumatic experience and finally being able to express themselves. Now, I do think we need to find a balance of sorts, but and I appreciate your comments, just a second ago on you being able to show restraint. I've heard from a lot of different people that how they may not have, they don't want to come to the council meetings as much now because they feel as if they say something, they're going to be heckled and so forth. But by the same token, there for a very long time has been a climate in our community in which people who are on the other side of that didn't want to come to the council meetings because they felt as if their voices weren't heard. So now, because the shoe's on the other foot, does that mean that we should just shun those who are now finally voicing their opinion? I remember being like, before I got on council, hearing from counselors that we want to hear from different people. We want to hear from different parts of the community. But now that's what we're getting. You're hearing from different people in different parts of the community, and it doesn't sound or it doesn't come off the same way in which they've heard it before, but this is what we ask for. We ask for community engagement.
I think there's people throughout our community that are not coming to this room because of the environments created. And even Mr. Mathon said that he had someone accompanying with him from Friendship Court who left early because of the environment in this room and did not find it acceptable. And I'm sorry, that's not, I mean, that's an audience member I would like to be able to retain here to stay for their agenda item and not be turned off by this environment. And I'm fine with, like, I feel like some of the outbursts are just really unfounded. There's people who just want to outburst and nothing more. And there's certainly people who speak up who I think are having productive dialogue in the conversation, but there's some of it I just think is very unproductive, and I don't really understand their goal, and I don't see them as the people who you're referring to who have that frustration that they're trying to just have their voices heard.
So I'll use an example of sorts. Miss Rosia Parker has had several outbursts, and she's been frustrated out of a variety of different things. And in the eyes of some, it would seem as if she comes and she just yells. But tonight, for example, even as she walked out, or even at the end of her comments, she made the point in regards to the plaques, which was subsequently followed by Ms. Galvin and I both following up and saying, you know what, you're right. So there was an opportunity for us to hear the meat in which what she was saying, in which she was actually just asking for us to bring about action for something that meant a great deal to her and a great deal to a lot of us. And no, I agree.
I have no problem with that.
But I think when some people watch and they hear her, for example, or hear others who may be like her, they just say, oh, I don't want to be around there because they yell or they loud or they may say a bad word or two. But these are still individuals who have to be heard. The message just may not come the way in which everybody wants to hear, but it's still a message nonetheless.
But you recognize there's still folks who just aren't ever coming up to the mic to share their thoughts. I feel like they're here for the political theater of it, and I just don't think that's just, to me, an unproductive use of time to constantly be interrupting everyone that has any position that's different than theirs. That's not an environment I want to create. I think I learned so much more from people who I think differently, though. And I think we need to give those voices the same opportunity to speak. And that's all I'll leave it.
Those voices think differently from you. They just express it differently as well.
I'm talking about the voices that probably think differently than all of us up here. I think that they have the right to be heard as well.
So then how can we value their voices over the individuals who we may say make noises? Everyone, this is a free room. Everyone has the ability and the opportunity to come. If you choose not to, like how are we supposed to, I mean, do we need to bake cookies again to make you come?
You said yourself, though, that there are some people not coming to speak for 3 minutes because they don't want to be heckled. That is not a welcoming environment. And I've heard from many people who don't want to come here because they don't want to deal with the gallery that resides here, because they're afraid that something they might say to support, like, the arts, or something just what seems pretty neutral, like, they are just going to get ridiculed for, and that's not what they signed up for. Like, that's not how they want to be treated, but they want to have their voices heard. So a lot of them have gone to resorting to emails, which I don't think is effective, and I just think it really it's not the environment that I think we should be
I'm
creating.
not denying that. I understand your point. I think that they also have a right to come here and speak. They should be able to speak freely. I feel like they are able to.
They're just yelling.
All right. So, is there anyone else who has a comment? No comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No? All right. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.